But occupational hazards notwithstanding, God's messengers felt compelled to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Amos put it like this:
Surely Yahweh does nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants the prophets. A lion has roared, who will not fear? Yahweh has spoken, who can but prophesy? Amos 3, 7 and 8.
Later, Peter and John, when told to shut up and go home, remarked,
Whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you, religious leaders, more than to God, you judge. For we cannot but speak of the things which we have seen and heard. Acts 4, 19 and 20.
For all their dedication and courage, the prophet's role was temporary. Like our program for the Tournament of Roses parade, between every line they wrote was the understanding that a day would come when the light of reality would make their words seem pale by comparison, like a candle outdoors on a brilliant summer's day. That doesn't lessen the significance of their service, however, for without their words, many of us would not survive to see God's bright tomorrow. Paul said it best.
Love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13, 8 through 13.
None of the spiritual gifts are designed to last beyond our mortal bodies, but love is. Prophecies will fail? Yes, they were meant to guide us in this life, not beyond. Besides, the shocking truth is God doesn't always keep his word. Now, before you stone me, let me point out that there are several times in Scripture where God clearly didn't do what he told his prophet he'd do, and the reason was always the same: mercy. Prophecy principle number 3. God's wrath is always tempered by his love. He postpones judgment until the last possible moment because he does not desire any of us to perish. He alone knows when our sin has reached the point of no return. Compare Genesis 15:15-16.
Now as for you, Abraham, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete.
And compare that to Numbers 21:23-24, some 400 years later.
So Sihon, the king of the Amorites, gathered all of his people together, and went out against Israel in the wilderness. And he came to Jahaz, and fought against Israel. Then Israel defeated him with the edge of the sword, and took possession of his land.
Because of his mercy, God didn't wipe out a rebellious nation of Israel and start over with Moses, as he threatened to do. And he didn't destroy Nineveh in 40 days, as he proclaimed he would through Jonah. Instead, he showed mercy, patience, and love. In the first case, because the prophet interceded for the people, and in the second, because the people repented, buying their city another century of life. We have no idea how deep the river of God's mercy runs. But here's another hint. Ever wonder why the oldest man in the Bible, Methuselah, lived so long? He was the grandfather of Noah, and he died at the extremely ripe old age of 969, the same year as the flood. This kind of coincidence begs us to dig beneath the surface to figure out what God may have been up to. Clue number 1, he was the son of Enoch, a godly man with an intriguing story of his own, the second man listed in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11. We'll look at that story a little later. Could it be that Enoch named his baby boy something prophetically significant? At first glance, it seems not. Methuselah, the Hebrew Methuselah, comes from 2 words, math, meaning man, that is, an adult, and shalach, meaning dart or spear. Not much help. But if we look at the primitive roots for those two words, we discovered something provocative. Math comes from mathe, meaning to extend, as in a man's years are extended beyond those of a child. Shelach, or spear, comes from shalach, to send away or cast out, hence to forsake. Some Hebrew scholars suggest that his name could be rendered when he dies, that is, at the extension of his years, it shall be sent. Was Enoch saying his son's life would personify the extension of man's time on earth before they were cast out? Pretty thin, you say. Perhaps, but the guy did live longer than anyone else, before or since. I've come to distrust coincidences. I'll put my money on God's mercy any day. All right then, let's get down to cases. I'd like to examine several Old Testament prophecies and their fulfillments with an eye toward comprehending the ones that are still ahead of us. Luke records this story about Joshua.
So he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh. Then he closed the book, and he gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed upon him. And he began to say to them, Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Luke 4:16-21.
The quote was from the prophet Isaiah, but Joshua had stopped and closed the book in mid-sentence. Isaiah had gone on to say,
And the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, the planting of Yahweh, that he may be glorified. Isaiah 61:2-3.
Why didn't Joshua quote the whole thing? Because only the first part was being fulfilled there and then, during his first century advent. By quoting this portion of the passage, he had claimed to be the promised Messiah.
He has anointed me.
But by cutting it short, he was saying, in effect, I am not going to do all of these things at this time. He was demonstrating prophecy principle number 4, peaks and valleys, the concept of split fulfillment. Where I live, the terrain is quite hilly. There are places where you can stand and see 4 or 5 ridges, one right after the other. But you can't see what's in between them. The only way to tell how deep or wide the valleys are is to go down into them, to live through them. Prophecy is often like that. The seer is shown a series of mountaintops, but he can't tell whether they're all clumped together or whether there are deep valleys of time in between them. In this case, Isaiah saw 2 groups of events that would take place a couple of thousand years apart, but he didn't know their fulfillment would be separate. He saw everything but the timing. When Christ came the first time, laying aside his glory, he brought us the good news of his salvation, healing and freeing us from the bonds of sin. But when he returns, he will have assumed his glory once again, wreaking righteous vengeance on those who have chosen to reject him and comforting those, especially among the Jews, who have accepted his gift of love. The principle of peaks and valleys caused a great deal of confusion in Joshua's day. Even his disciples thought at first that he had come to overthrow Rome and set up his kingdom on the earth. But it should not be a source of confusion for us today. With the benefit of hindsight, we can know what they did not. We need not assume that a prophetic passage will be fulfilled all at once. God rather will do things in his own sweet time and in his own inimitable fashion. To clarify the principle, let's look at one more example, the prophecies concerning the downfall of Babylon. Now, this was no mean city. About 50 miles south of present-day Baghdad, it was originally founded by Nimrod, the great-grandson of Noah. It was the premier city of the post-Diluvian world, rising and declining in successive waves, as great cities often do. In 626 BC, Nabopolassar, the Chaldean, threw off the yoke of Assyria. There are a bunch of biblical prophecies predicting that, too. And he rebuilt the city. His son Nebuchadnezzar II became its greatest monarch, dispensing God's judgment upon an apostate and rebellious Judah in 586. Nebuchadnezzar's vision, interpreted by the Jewish captive Daniel, pinpointed Babylon as the first of 4 great world powers. Before Nebuchadnezzar had drawn his first breath, Babylon's fall had already been predicted by the prophets of Israel. Isaiah, writing over 150 years before the fall of Jerusalem, had said,
"Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, who will not regard silver, and as for gold, they will not delight in it. Also their blows will dash the young men to pieces, and they will have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye will not spare children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited, nor will it be settled from generation to generation, nor will the Arabian pitch tents there, nor will the shepherds make their sheepfolds there. But wild beasts of the desert will live there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches will dwell there, and wild goats will caper there. The hyenas will howl in their citadels, and jackals in their pleasant places. Her time is near to come, and her days will not be prolonged." Isaiah 13:17-22.
He went on to say,
"For I will rise up against them, says Yahweh of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant, and offspring and posterity, says Yahweh. I will also make it a possession for the porcupine, and marshes of muddy water. I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, says Yahweh of hosts." Isaiah 14:22-23.
Another prophet predicted,
"They shall not take from you, Babylon, a stone for a corner, nor for a stone for a foundation, but you shall be desolate forever, says Yahweh." Jeremiah 51:26.
So between the two of them, God predicted that the city of Babylon, then approaching its glory days, would be destroyed as completely as Sodom and Gomorrah had been, never to be inhabited again, even by wandering Bedouins. It would be both a home for desert creatures and a swamp, seemingly a glaring contradiction. The key, besides God's omniscience, of course, is the principle of peaks and valleys, split fulfillment. This is how the history unfolded. Half a century after the fall of Judah, as the Persians under Cyrus pondered ways to breach the formidable walls of the city, a couple of Babylonian deserters wandered into their camp. They pointed out that one of the things that made the place siege-proof was that the Euphrates ran under the wall. Perhaps the Persians could too. Cyrus conferred with his counselor, Chrysandrus, who opined that if they could divert the river, they could waltz in and take the place without firing a shot, more or less. The course of the river had tended to shift from time to time anyway, wandering off and losing itself in the marshes west of the city. Why not divert the Euphrates with a huge trench? Cyrus did just that, and on October 13th, 539 BC, he took Babylon, while its overconfident regent drank himself under the table, celebrating, no doubt, the fact that nobody would ever get over his wall, the strongest city wall on earth at the time. That story is recorded in Daniel 5. Interestingly, though the Persian commander Cyrus was credited with conquering the city, Daniel says that his ally, Darius the Mede, a.k.a. Gobryas, mentioned in contemporary inscriptions as the man who defeated Babylon without a battle, took control of the kingdom, just as Isaiah had predicted.